So, I have one more terrible preacher story before we leave this series we've been in. As I understood it, there was this young mother. She's dealing with all of her, more than her fair share of stress and worry. And all of a sudden, she answers the phone one day, okay? And the caller says, "Hey, honey, it's Mom. I've called because I know you're busy with the kids, and I just want to give you some help and a little bit of a break. So I'm going to stop by in a little bit. I'm going to clean the house, and I'm going to take care of the baby, and I'm going to prepare dinner for the boys, and they get home from school. And I want you to just get ready and go to my beautician. I've already paid for it. They're going to give you the works, and just enjoy it and have a great time. Your appointment's at 1 o'clock. And then I need just call George and at the office and tell him you're going to meet him at Outback for dinner on me." And all of a sudden the caller says, "George, who's George?" She said, "Your husband." I said, "My husband's name's Steve." All of a sudden the caller says, "Is this 555-3212? And the lady says, "No, it's 555-2212. And the embarrassed caller says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got a wrong number." And there was silence on the phone until finally the lady said, "Does that mean you're not coming over?" Now I hope, I don't know about you, but I know that feeling, okay? And we've come to the end of this series I've called Stressed Out. And I can only hope that the series has helped you and not stressed you out more. Research, the reason I really got into this is I sensed it in ourselves and in our congregation, our community, in our schools and so forth. So I looked at it, and sure enough, according to the surveys, 2 out of every 3 families report feeling really stressed out right now. And last time, let me remind you, handle it, and that's not changing. It's not true that it's always something, right? It's always something. But the good news is that God specialized and answered all this stress. And we began by looking at one of the big sources of stress reported as relationships. So we looked at the various relationships in the family and God's answer for that stress. We began with moms and said God's prescription for stressed out moms is do the best with what you have and then cry out to God for his best for what you need, okay? And then we looked at our stressed out kids. And we said, the answer for that is to make sure you give them lots of grace, just lots of grace. And then we looked at our stressed out marriages because that happens. And we said that God's answer for that is get God involved on the front end and then do your job, do your part, and just stick with it. And then we addressed the number one source of stress reported in all these surveys, and that's finances, financial stress. And we said that this consuming desire to have more and have it now leads to a life of squandering our money and spending everything we have and leading not just to stress, but I believe bondage. And I see it in our community. But the Prince of Peace, however, has principles of financial peace that will work if you follow them. And then last week, of course, we looked at Father's Day. We looked at our stressed out dads, another relationship in the family, and discovered that from a guy named Job that no matter how bad it gets, it's not the end of your stories, dads. It's not. And I've taken a lot of strength from that. It's not the end of my story. It's not the end of yours. So the answer is from God was to look to God, lean on him, live closely to him, and just listen carefully to him. Well, that brings us to today. And what I wanted to do today is close by looking at another of the major sources of stress on families. And according to the American Psychological Association, and according to every survey that's ever been filled out, including the ones you filled out here at Easter, the top sources of stress in our lives are money, relationships, and then this one, our time, our schedules. Our schedules can stress us out. So I want to close this series by looking at our stressed out days. And I'm very concerned about this one for personal reasons because this is me. And so what's God say about that? Now to explain it, I brought a couple of objects up here to help explain what I'm talking about here. So can you see this? Everybody know what this is? Everybody see this? What is this? This is a calendar, wall calendar. How many of you have ever had a wall calendar? Ever had a wall calendar? Okay. Any of you ever keep your family schedule on your wall calendar, keep up with appointments and all that kind of stuff? Well, we used to do that until we had more things going on than you could fit in that one little square. I mean, it just wouldn't fit in there. So, remember the day we quit using calendars, and they came up with these other things, and they're called day planners. Remember that? The day planners. And so instead of having just one box you had a whole page for a day, And that worked until these things got so big, they were bigger than an elephant's leg, and it was hard to carry it around with you. We're getting rid of that. And so they replaced that with, you know what they replaced them with? They replaced them with one of these little things. And they give you an app on this phone that's a calendar app. How many of you have a calendar app on your phone? Let me see. Okay. You use it? Okay. Anybody like me that have more than one calendar app because you have more than one calendar to keep? Okay, I'm not the only one. I thought I was a crazy one. I got one for my personal life, one for the church life, and then I got school life, and it's like, how do I keep all this going? So I have multiple apps to keep up with all the schedule. And anybody ever realize that your calendar app can actually crash on you? I found even digital calendars have a limit to the amount of things you can enter on one day. And if you enter too many, the app will crash on you. I mean, it's a mess, and it just stresses you out. In the book of Job, chapter 9, verse 25, it says, my days are going by faster than I can run. You ever feel that way? I am running in every direction, but I can't keep up. Ever felt that way? I can't keep up with the demands. I can't keep up with the opportunities. I can't keep up. And the result is that my days fly by, and I don't even enjoy life anymore. I'm going, yeah, I understand that. I understand that. And the reason for that is that we have run out of what behavioral psychologists call margin. Okay, margin. I want to talk to you about that. You've heard that term when it comes to the white space around a page, okay? That's margin on a page, okay? But did you know it also refers to something in our lives? That it refers actually to our day-to-day lives. One psychologist defined it this way. Margin is the space between your load and your limit, okay? Your load is the things that you're carrying right now, every day, your responsibilities, the things that you have to do, all those activities that fill your calendar and fill that app and make it crash sometimes, okay? That's your load. Your limit is the amount of resources you have to accomplish those responsibilities and demands and activities in terms of time and energy and so forth. But here's the thing, catch this, when we encroach upon our margins and push past our limits, the result's stress. We start pushing into those margins, the things we got to do, want to do, have to do, all that. When you push into those things and beyond your limits, the result's going to be stress. Margin is that space between your load and your limit. It's the amount of something you have beyond what you have to have, okay? The amount of money you have beyond your obligations. The amount of energy you have beyond your burdens, the amount of time you have beyond your responsibilities. And we all need that margin in our lives in every area, be it physically, be it emotionally, be it relationally, be it financially, be it spiritually. Because without it, we push beyond those limits, and then it causes stress. Anybody besides me ever been there? I want to make sure we all understand this and we're living there, okay? Most of us. Those of you who have gotten beyond this, I am so thankful for you. Would you teach me how you did it? And if you're retired, then I think maybe that's it. But I know a lot of retirees in the house that know what it's like to still be stressed out by your schedules. Yes, okay. Okay. So what's the Lord have to say about that? Well, I want you to locate in your Bibles, New Testament, get to the letter of Ephesians. Paul wrote to the letter of Ephesians. So you got to get through the Gospels, get through a few of the books to find the one that Paul wrote to Ephesians. As you're doing that, a little bit of background here. Paul wrote this to the congregations in an area of Asia Minor around the city of Ephesus. It's what's modern-day Turkey today. And he wrote it to that church and the churches around that. And it starts out very doctrinal. This is what we believe, and this is what, okay. But then it turns very practical. How do we live out those beliefs? How do we apply this in everyday life, especially with our stressed out days? And when you get to chapter 5, if you got it there, chapter 5, verse 15, here's what it says. Be very careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. The little wording in that opening phrase there is watch carefully or watch accurately how you walk. Okay? Paul uses the analogy, the metaphor of walking to talk about our day-to-day lives. And in the first century, that made sense because in order to get from point A to point B in the first century, guess how you did it? You usually walked. That was their form of transportation for everybody. But the roads and trails, however, were sometimes rough at best and non-existent at worst. So the wisdom of the day was pay careful attention, okay? Pay careful attention to where you're walking if you want to get from point A to point B without breaking something. Now, we typically don't walk a lot of places today. I mean, come on, how many walked to church this morning? Maybe one or two or three of you? But not many of it, okay? Most of us drive, right? So let me give you a different analogy, kind of put the same thought together. Have any of you ever had a car that was out of alignment? Ever had a car out of alignment? Okay, so you understand it. When your car is out of alignment, the thing is always pulling to one side or the other, right? And it's always trying to just take you right off the road. Well, using that analogy, here's what Paul is saying in Ephesians 5. Be very careful of the alignment of your life. Because if you aren't, well, for one thing, your sinful nature is going to pull you right out of alignment with God and take you right off the road of your journey with Him. And you add to that fact that you've got a culture around you that is doing anything but going God's way. And it's constantly trying to pull you off the road with God and right out of your journey with Him. So be very careful of the alignment of your life. You see, you and I face a constant pull away from the most important things. If you can follow this, you'll understand everything I'm trying to say today. You and I face a constant pull away from the most important things to lesser important things. And if you don't fight against that, it will stress out your days. If you don't believe that, I want you to consider the following facts. Fact number one, most common response today to the greeting, how are you, has changed. It used to be, how are you? Fine, how you doing? Now the most common response to that is, busy. How are you? Busy. Crazy busy. Horribly busy. Okay, that's the most common response today. Did you know? Did you know that people sleep 2.5 hours less today than they did 100 years ago? Get at least 2.5 hours less sleep than they did 100 years ago. Did you know that, by the way, one third of all U.S. working adults get less than 6 hours of sleep a night, according to the CDC. What that means, I want you to catch this. This is what I saw it. I thought, oh my goodness. That means there are 80 million adults driving around right now sleep deprived. Does that scare anybody besides me? Okay. Did you know that the average full-time employee now works 47 hours a week? And that if you're a salaried full-time employee, the average is 5 more beyond that. And did you know that 1/3 of all Americans say that they do not have enough time in their day to get things done? That was a Johns Hopkins study. And what really unsettled me about their study is what they discovered was that the greatest source of things that consume us is not things that we have to do, but things that we choose to do. I hope that shocked you, because that's critical to understand if you're going to understand what God's trying to say to us today. The greatest source of the things that consume our lives and take us off the road and into stress is not things that we have to do. It's things that we're choosing to do. This will shock you, but on average, Americans have more free time today than any previous generation of our nation. More free time today. But we're filling it with more and more and more and more and more. And the crazy thing is, it's by our own choice. But remember what we read in God's Word. Be very careful how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise. Okay. Then what are these unwise ways that people are living? What are the things that are pushing us beyond our limits and stressing out our days and dragging us right off the road? Well, I want to talk about the most common ones according to the research. Are in no particular order, but number one, I think we'd all agree with, is the financial security myth. I'll get that down. Some people are stressed out because they're consumed with this drive for financial affluence. Some work multiple jobs, not because they have to, but because they want to grab that golden parachute. Some people spend hours poring over their 401k, consumed with their number, the amount of money they think it's going to take to be financially secure. Some take the whatever I got to do to get the promotion approach to climbing the salary scale. By the way, studies have shown that no matter how much money a person has, catch this, no matter how much money a person has, when you ask them, how much would it take for you to have enough? Every single one of them says more than they have, no matter how much they have. Did you catch that? We all feel it's going to take more than whatever I have. It's the financial security myth, and it has stressed out a bunch of people. Anybody? Anybody? Next one is what I call the comparison trap. I saw this one. This is what psychologists call people whose days are consumed not just with keeping up with their neighbors, but surpassing their neighbors, okay? This is the student who's obsessed with having the best grades in class. This is the athlete who'll go to any length to get the record in the school or the sport. This is the mom or dad who have kids. The kids got to do more, have more, experience more, so they can post more than others. Fueled by social media, aggravated by advertising, the comparison trap has stressed out many a day and many a life. And maybe it's stressing you out. Then. How about this one? It's what counselors call the affirmation addiction. How to explain this one? Okay, everybody likes to be liked, right? Anybody here like to be hated? I just want to say hand. If you are, there is a psychological term for that disease, and we'll get you fixed. Anyhow, not fixed. That sounds terrible. Bad image just went through my mind. Okay, everybody likes to be liked. Get back on track, Russell. You're not being liked, okay? Everybody likes to be liked, but there are days that we allow our lives to be controlled, even consumed by getting the affirmation and the acceptance of other people, okay? Let me ask it this way. Have you ever pulled an all-nighter just to complete a project to get the affirmation of somebody? Sure you have. It's called having a job, right? You ever spent money you couldn't afford to impress somebody and get them to like you? Sure you have. It's called going on a date, right? Have you ever gone to an activity? You went to an event you didn't even like just so somebody would like you. It's called being a parent, right? Or being in a family. That's us. It's affirmation addiction, and I really hope you enjoyed my description of it, okay? Okay, that was a very thinly veiled attempt at humor, and you missed it all, and I was so hurt. Affirmation addiction can stress us out. Maybe it's stressed you out. Here's another one, according to the research I saw. Technology distractions. Okay, let's just do it. How many screens do we have in the room? Be loud and proud about it. Come on. Either raise your hand, or if you got it in your hand, put it out there. We all, okay. Anybody in here not have a screen on them? Okay. You left it at home, did you? Okay. Anyhow, according to the studies, screen time on this or TV or a computer or whatever is consuming people's margins like incredible ways. Research has proven that most people who feel like they don't have any free time actually do have the free time. They're just frittering it away with mindless time spent scrolling on these things. Are you ready for this? According to the American Time Survey, the most recent American Time Survey, average adult spends 3 hours a day streaming media. Okay? Average teenager, you ready for it? 9 hours a day online. From YouTube to TikTok to Snapchat to video games. That's not even talking the time they spend on television. But don't get too self-righteous, parents. A new Nielsen rating shows that the adults in the U.S., that's us adults in this room, between your tablet, your smartphone, your computer, your multimedia devices, your DVD, your DVR, your video games, 10.5 hours a day on it, on average. Those of us in the room, 10.5 hours a day. And one of the worst things about it, according to the research, is that they are so isolating. They do more to keep us from meaningful relationships and productive activities than anything else. They easily pull us right off the road, right past our limits, and right into stress. Okay, then there's the one that's been shown to consume people generation after generation after generation. It's not just young or old. And that's what's called the status obsession. It is. We are obsessed with bigger and better and fancier and more extreme and more expensive. Come on, think about it. We choose our clothing based on how we think it will make us look to other people. We choose our career based on how we can climb that professional ladder. We choose our vocations based on how we can post about our experience, our vacations based on how we think we can post about it on our social media. We are constantly chasing that next thrill or that next possession or that next promotion. I know people, if they don't have something meaningful to post today, it's going to ruin their day. I know people who will live in a rat-infested apartment so they can drive a really nice car, and then they burn it up. But that's another story. Worse than that. Get it back, Russell, you blew it. I know people who will go without, okay, ladies, I know people who go without food for a week so they can buy those shoes, all right? I know people who've given plasma so they can buy a MacBook, right? And I know people who live off of ramen noodles so they can take that next cruise, right? The obsession to have the trendiest stuff and the coolest vacations and the extremest thrills and the best whatever has consumed our limits, pushed us right into stress, right? And can we just admit it? There's a little bit of that in all of us, and there's a whole lot of that in some of us. I will never forget the story about a state trooper who came up upon a wreck. It was a bad wreck. And a young man sitting there next to his wrecked, demolished car crying, "My BMW, I've lost my BMW." And the state trooper looks at him and said, "BMW, nothing, man, you've lost your left arm." And he looks down and goes, "My Rolex, I've lost my Rolex." Okay, it's just one of the contributing factors that can easily consume us, push us right off the road. True? Okay. Are you being pulled off the road by any of them? I took the time to read Johns Hopkins study, Mood Disorder Center study. According to that study, here are the most common results. Here's what happens when we push beyond our limits. Are you ready for this? The signs of living beyond your limits. Anxiety. You ever been anxious about anything? Ever worried about anything? Any worriers in the house want to admit it? Speak the truth, shame the devil. Irritability. Do you need me to call names out? Irritability. True. Depression. Insomnia. Illness, headaches, irritable bowel syndrome, heart attack. All of those, according to the research, are signs that you've pushed beyond your limits. And some of you in this room have more than just one or two of those. Folks, I guess all of us do it. All of us do it to some degree. Some of us do it to terrible degrees. But when we allow ourselves to be pulled off center and pushed beyond our limits, it's going to mess us up. Be very careful how you live, wrote Paul. Not as unwise, but as wise. It's just unwise to push beyond your limits. It's unwise to allow yourself to get out of alignment in life. And yet so many of us in this room, and those even watching online, we know all too well the damage of it. True? So, is there any help for this one? Well, I believe there is. And with time I got left, I want to drill down into the words of Paul in Ephesians 5 here and show you something God showed me about the necessary margins for your stressed out days. To bring internal capability greater than your external pressures so that you don't have to live in stress with your margins. Okay? How do we keep ourselves from being pulled off center? Paul wrote, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise." So how do we live wisely within our limits? Well, Paul tells us here how to create the margins so we don't push beyond them and stress out our days. And he begins with this statement, make the most of every opportunity. Interestingly enough, that phrase, make the most, is actually just one word in the original Greek. It means it basically means to buy something out of, to purchase out of. And it was typically used most often for purchasing freedom for a slave. And thus the term often translates redeem. Okay? Paul's point seems to be that you can't buy everything, so you'd better choose to buy the best things. Or to put it another way, prioritize your options, folks. Prioritize your options. The fact is that all of us have to learn to say no to even some good things if we're going to say yes to the best things. And that was so good, I'm going to say it again. We've got to learn to say no to some good things in order to say yes to the best things. Good things can become the enemy of the best things, so you got to prioritize in life. And don't miss the significant point here. It's a choice. Prioritization is a choice. Remember, for most of us, in spite of the excuses we're making to ourselves right now, it's not the things that we have to do, it's the things we're choosing to do that are consuming our margins and stressing us out. So you see here, the plain truth is, you always have time to do what you make time to do. You realize that? You always find time to make time to do what you want to do. So prioritize your options and regularly prune away the ones that aren't the top priorities. Right now, my backyard has become a flower exhibition. And one of those is got some roses out there that somebody wanted planted, so somebody else planted, and then we water. Anyhow, by the way, I wasn't the one who planted them, so don't feel sorry for me. But the thing about roses, anybody like roses? Anybody have roses in here? Okay. The thing about roses, you have to prune them to make them grow better, right? You got to prune things to make them bloom more. Well, you ever notice how every year in our lives, we seem to sprout new activities? Isn't that true? We just sprout new activities in our lives. But you can't just keep adding things. You got to prioritize your options and periodically prune out things in order to have greater fruitfulness. It's got to be that way. What are the unhealthy things, the draining things that you need to cut out of your life right now? That's a worthy question to ask yourself today. What are the good things that you need to prune so you can do the best things? There are some things that they're not necessarily wrong, not at all, but they're not the best things because even good things can keep you from the best things, so prune them. Experience, by the way, has taught us that typically the best things are usually get pushed out the first when we overload our schedules. Did you hear what I said? When we get on, we lose our margins and so forth, usually it's the best things that get pushed out of our schedules. I think one of the first things I find gets pushed right out of the schedule is intimate time with God. Anybody besides me ever been too busy to even talk to God? Am I the only one? And it happens though. So here's the challenge. If you want to apply this lesson, hey, prioritize spending time with God. The first 5-10 minutes a day, but prioritize that. Realign your life with God around that and see the difference it makes. By the way, the other thing that studies show gets pushed out of our lives, the first of the things when we don't prioritize, is intentional time for rest. Can I talk to you about a second? Did you catch the fact that on average people in our nation are sleep deprived? For some of you, the most spiritual thing you could do today is go home and take a nap. Yes, that means the pastor just gave some of you permission to go home and take a nap. You got that? Unfortunately, proper rest is one of the first things that gets pushed right out of our lives. Anybody besides Russell end up sleeping way too little when the schedule gets too full. Okay? So, look at this verse again, though. Let me show you something else the Lord showed me about how to create and live within a margin. Prioritize, that's one of them. Let me show you something else. He says, make the most of every opportunity. That word opportunity is one of the Greek words for time. It's kairos. It's time in terms of your special moments and seasons rather than in terms of hours and minutes, okay? That's why it often gets translated opportunities. Well, my thought here is that our opportunities are all limited. Do you know that? Your time is limited. Your money is limited. Your energy is limited. Everything in your life has limits, so you've got to make the most of them. Now, God is the author of your limits, and He knows best how you should keep them. So the key here, I think, is to accept your limitations. If you ignore them, you're going to be the one hurt. I'll give you a simple analogy on that. That cell phone you have, it's got a battery in it, right? And it's got a limited amount of energy in that battery. So when it gets down to the last percentage and that little battery light turns red, if you don't plug that thing in, what's going to happen? It's going to die on you, right? Listen to me. The warning light's been going off in some of your lives. You've pushed way beyond the limits. Don't ignore them. What are those warning lights? Well, I'll tell you some of the ones I find. Irritability is a big one. You find yourself getting more irritable with people, more grumpy with people. That's a sign. That's a warning sign. Light's going off. You're pushing beyond your margins. The chronic headache and stomach problems I talked about earlier, that's a sign you're pushing beyond your margins. That anger, that depression, feeling so discouraged, that's a sign. It's a warning sign. You're pushing beyond your margins. Please believe this. If you burn your candle at both ends, you are not as bright as you think you are. I needed to learn that one so much. Actually, somebody gave me, and I keep it on my shelf in my study. It's a candle that somebody actually took and molded to where it turned up both ends of it. Put wicks out of both sides. But it says, if you try to burn your candle at both ends, you are not as bright as you think you are. Well, while you consider that one, let me show you something else Paul wrote. Be very careful then how you live. He says, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Okay, it's not just prioritizing your choices and accepting your limitations. Folks, you also need to expect your problems. Expect there to be problems. We know that we live in a fallen world. We know that the days are evil. We know that we're going to face problems and delays, but for some reason, we act like we don't. Let me say that again. We know we're going to face problems. We know we're going to have limitations, but we try to act like they don't exist. You know it's going to cost more than the estimate, but you still don't budget for it. Well, let me really get up in your grill. You know that there's going to be traffic, but you still don't leave early enough to get there on time. And then you try to blame it on something else. I read somewhere, I won't say this, but some of you are going to be really upset with me. I read somewhere an article once that said chronic tardiness is a moral issue, and you need to deal with it. Okay, get off of that one, Russell. They're really going to hate you. Just ruin that affirmation thing. One of the most important things we can do to build margins in our lives is keep from being pulled off center is expect the problems, expect the delays, and plan for them. Obvious example of that's when it comes to financial margins in our lives. Get on a budget. Make a plan so that you can deal with the unavoidable and the unexpected that are going to occur. One of the simplest plans I've ever heard. I think this was great. I don't even remember where I came across it. It was simple. It was this. 3 things. Pay God first. That's your tithe. Pay yourself second. That's your savings. Third, use the rest of the money the best you can to meet your expenses. I think that's pretty good. If you don't expect problems by not saving, first thing it's going to neglect is your tithe. Exactly. And the next thing you're going to neglect is to fail to meet your expenses. Hey, same thing's true with God, your time with God. Here's the plan. Give God the first part of your time. Give yourself the second part of your time by getting enough rest. And then use the rest of it for all your commitments and activities. You need to leave some margin. You cannot just keep consuming and cramming things into your life, into every moment, because you're going to face problems that are going to take up time that you didn't count on, and now you're in trouble. Right? Then one thing more that the Lord showed me from this passage, that maybe if you didn't like any of the others, maybe you'll like this one. How to create and live within margins so you don't just get pushed off the road, stressed out. Paul wrote, be very careful then how you live. Not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. This last critical step to living within your limits is knowing and following the Lord's will. He created you. He gave you the abilities that you have. He set the limits on your abilities. He planned for you, and He has a plan for you. Did you catch that? He planned for you, and He has a plan for your life. One that will result in the best possible version of you living the best possible life that you could have. He even went to the extent of sending His only Son to the cross so that when you mess up that plan, He could fix it if you just let Him. So I think the key here is this. Entrust your plans to the Lord. Relinquish control of those plans to the only one who can ever get you on the right path and keep you on the right path. Put Jesus in the driver's seat and take your hands off the wheel. Thank you, Carrie Underwood. Nobody got that one, Russell. I just think that's the best way to keep on track. And not allow your days to push you beyond your limits and stress you and your family out. So I found this verse in the Psalms. I want to pull it together with this. I love this. When I'm ready to give up And I just know that describes some folks today. You're ready to give up. You're ready to give up on your marriage. You're ready to give up on your kids. You're ready to give up on your job. You're ready to give up on your dream. You're ready to give up on your health. You're ready to give up on your education. You're ready to give up on your friends. You're ready to give up. But notice, Psalmist said, when I'm ready to give up, He knows what I should do. The Lord knows what I should do. And if I entrust my plans to Him, He's going to lead me into the right direction. If I surrender myself to Him, He's going to get me where I need to go. Jesus had a special word for all of us who find ourselves in that situation, beyond our limits, stressed out, at the point ready to give up. Jesus had a special word. It was this: come to me. I believe He brought you here today to hear that. Come to me, Jesus said. All of you who are tired. Anybody tired? Come to me, all you who are tired and heavy burdened. Anybody heavy burdened? He says, come to me, all you who are tired and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Anybody need any rest? Then why don't you come to Jesus? Come to Jesus and do it right now as we pray. Lord, I just want to do my best to pray for and pray over everyone in this room right now. And I realized, God, every time I kept looking at this lesson, it's a very practical one, maybe not all that inspiring and way too convicting. But God, I just sense that so many are so tired. And it has to do with the stressed out days we're trying to live. And I can only hope that maybe, just maybe, the wisdom of your word will find root in our lives. That we will recognize our limits. That we'll prioritize our lives. That we will plan for the enemy's distractions and difficulties. And that somehow, some way, God, every one of us will entrust our plans to you. In fact, God, anyone who's willing to pray with me a simple prayer, I want to pray it. Lord, I'm putting my life in your hands afresh this moment. The plans of my life, the things that I think, the things that I want, I'm putting them in your hands. Let me follow your ways. Teach me to prioritize my life and know my limits and be willing to prune out the things that don't get me to your best. God, help me be prepared for the difficulties so that I don't get crabby with others and grumpy with you. God, somehow help me to trust my plans in your hands so much that I begin to live free from the stress. With you working inside of me so much that what you've created in me, the capabilities you've created in me are greater than the pressures of my life. And there's peace. And I pray that over everybody in this room, everybody online. Speak your peace now. And grant it, I pray. In the name of Jesus. And all God's people said, amen. God bless you guys. Stay out of the heat. Good luck with that. The Lord